The entire world has watched Japan of late with fear, terror, horror, compassion, a desire to help, a desire to do something, to turn around one of the most incredible and most destructive natural disasters the world's ever seen. And we've certainly kept the people of Japan in our prayers during this time, as well as the relief workers and all those attempting to bring about a restoration of some sort and a better day. It is truly terrifying. One of the interesting things I've gleaned paying attention to this disaster has been from journalists who've decided to stay inside Japan and to continue to report despite the danger, the great danger, it seems. And the reports, I think, have been fascinating about the behavior of the Japanese people in the midst of this unspeakable disaster. I've been reading a lot in Time magazine lately about how orderly the Japanese people have been, about how compassionate they've been with one another. There hasn't been chaos in the streets. There hasn't been any rioting. Everything has been very calm and ordered. And one journalist in Time said the closest thing he's seen to chaos was a confused older Japanese man accidentally cut in line to receive rice in front of the person that was in line before him. This accidental misstep has been the closest thing to chaos that this reporter has seen in this land. And I just think it's incredible. I don't know what accounts for it, and lots of journalists have been talking about what might account for it. It is certainly a culture of discipline, a culture of order. Some have argued that the Japanese people are enculturated to be orderly, disciplined, and somewhat stoic about life in general. And that all may be true. I'm no student of Japanese history or the Japanese people. But one Japanese word that's been thrown around in lots of articles I've read, and being no student of Japanese history or the people, least of which the language. So I'm going to throw this out there, and some of you may know better than I, and that's fine. But the word is shogunai, which is a word that means something like c'est la vie in French. This is the way it is. This is the way. This is life. But shogunai tends to mean something more like there is nothing to be done. This idea that what has happened, and there is nothing to be done. And there have been lots of journalists using this language, saying that this is how the Japanese people are speaking about this disaster and their response to it. But one journalist in particular mentioned that there's actually a little bit more underneath that word shogunai than a kind of resigned fatalism. Underneath the word, there's something also like calm determination to overcome what cannot be controlled. So you have this idea that the impossible, unimaginable event has occurred in the lives of the Japanese people. And they recognize there's nothing to do to make it go away. But there's this calm sense that resides within them that the unimaginable will be addressed and will be overcome. I think that's fascinating. The idea that a people have this firm determination and this strength living within them, that they can face these terrifying days with order and discipline, knowing that putting one foot in front of the other, doing the next right thing, they will rebuild Japan anew. I sometimes wish we had a little more of that here in the U.S. I couldn't help but think about Katrina. And in 24 hours, we're killing one another in the Superdome in New Orleans. And the Japanese people respond with dignity and compassion for one another. Not fighting over scraps, not fighting over territory, but moving single-mindedly and together to address the days ahead. I think you only have that kind of strength when it lives in you, when it's part of you, when it resides at your core. In the gospel lesson this morning, the long gospel lesson this morning, with lots of complicated pieces and bits, I think addresses what's inside in a very real and powerful way. Jesus addresses this Samaritan woman at the well of Jacob. He's thirsty and he asks for a drink. Now, the narrator in the gospel will tell you this is a very unusual event because Samaritans are ancient enemies of Jews. And Jews normally don't have anything to do with Samaritans. That's what the text tells us. In fact, it's even worse that Jews see Samaritans as heretics, traitors to the Orthodox Jewish faith. So the fact that Jesus has this encounter with this woman at this well at all is unusual. And she's known some difficulty in her life. But Jesus doesn't deal with her as a Samaritan. Jesus doesn't deal with her as a woman. Jesus won't allow any blanket label for this individual to deter him from dealing with her as an individual. And he goes right to the core of her story. They have the discussion about water, how they shouldn't be talking, but Jesus says, I know you. I know where you've been. I know what your life has been like. I know you're broken. I know your story. But I'm not going to deal with any of the labels, any of the mess. I want to deal with you. And they get into that discussion about water. That most basic of necessities that we know, especially if you're living in the desert or if you're getting over a sinus infection. But there's this confusion. She speaks in this literal sense about water. And Jesus is speaking metaphorically. He's speaking about life in a whole different kind of a way. And she wants it, this Samaritan woman, this heretic. She says, give it to me. I'll take it. I would love not to come back to this well and mess around with a bucket and all of this. But Jesus doesn't give her any water. He doesn't give her any water at all. He backs away from her and he says what he wants to give her is a spring that will live inside her and send water to the surface from within her. He doesn't want to deal with Jerusalem. He doesn't want to deal with a mountain. He doesn't want to deal with all of the externals and all of the labels and all of the tradition, all the other stuff. He says for her, as an individual, the place where the rubber hits the road and where the faith matters is when it gushes up from within her like a spring of water. He doesn't give her a cup of water. He makes her a well in this gospel lesson. Jesus offers her acceptance and transformation so that she becomes a vehicle to offer acceptance and transformation to those she will encounter. And that's what happens in the lesson, right? In the gospel story, she immediately goes back to the city, tells everyone that will listen, she's found the Messiah. He told me about everything I've ever done. And the text tells us they initially believe her, so they rush out to see Jesus. And then they spend a little time with Jesus. And then they believe because they've had that experience. And they become springs of living water as well. Not springs that dry up, but springs that offer sustenance and life and strength to meet the days ahead and to offer acceptance and transformation. In the church, we often speak of Jesus and we speak of the gospel as a kind of gift. We are given salvation. We are given grace. We are given mercy. And that's all true. But I wonder if Jesus isn't looking to give us something as much as make us something. Sometimes I think we stand around so passive, waiting for God to do something in our lives. Waiting to receive that grace and mercy. Waiting to receive that acceptance. Waiting for that transformation. And I think Jesus doesn't want us to wait. I think Jesus wants us to move right out there into it and to become it. Friends, this day, we deal with a gospel lesson that articulates a different kind of trust in God. Not a God that will just give us what we need, but a God that will make us be who we are to be. I think the good news of this particular gospel lesson is that we don't receive a gift when we follow Jesus. The good news of this gospel lesson is that we don't receive a gift when we follow Jesus. We become the gift when we follow Jesus. You are the gift. Don't wait for it. Be it.